This is an after-show blab. We do these on Friday evenings after our Wisdom Factory presentation on Google Plus Hangouts. And this is just a way to informally follow up if anyone who was interested in the show didn't get a chance to ask a question, or other people who didn't see the show and are wondering through Blabland and see what's this about and drop in to ask questions. So
I can also, if the people who had asked the questions which we didn't answer in the show, we could also read them and you could answer them here in case they don't show up.
I thought this one was interesting. Ruth Ann.
We first should present Jon.
Oh.
We didn't.
We didn't. We just assumed everybody knew
Everybody
Jon.
knows him.
Jon is a very well-known in certain circles guest, and he is the author most recently of Reinventing Capitalism, How We Broke Money and How We Fix It from the Inside and Out. And it's a very ambitious work, a very lofty work, but not without plenty of research. This is what I would call a trustworthy book. It's not pie in the sky. It's based on real life situations, where we are now and what direction we have to go, how we have to change ourselves, as well as the money system that we're living in, that in turn affects how we see ourselves, and getting out of feelings of scarcity and fear. Yeah,
exactly.
And
I was thinking after that, what you said, Jon, this is a sort of basic fear we have. What will happen when we are aging? What will happen when we don't have enough money for health issues? And if there's nobody, we don't have children, there's nobody to take care for us.
Oh my God, I forgot to have children. Oh.
Yeah, I mean, even if you have children nowadays, it's not that like here in Italy. No guarantee.
No guarantee.
You know, here in Italy, it still is. It still
almost.
is. That's all relying still on the family system. Or not all, but I would say 90%.
Yep.
So if you don't have children here.
Which is kind of a protection in times like this, because Italy will be less affected than, say, Germany or Holland or Great Britain or the USA. You know, if the huge changes come, there's still this support system in place, traditional support system in place. Yeah. But anyway, I thought Ruth Ann purchases.
Ruth Ann, we didn't come to her in the show. Do you still have the event page so that you can read it too?
No.
Yeah, I read it to the public.
Okay, go ahead.
Ruth Ann Purchase says, since I am over-experienced and under-degreed, I have been caring for children, ailing family members, and my very poor community. They call me a workaholic because I work so hard. But I will not receive Social Security because I work under the table or in return for room and board or other benefits. Many who lost their work in the last decade are now functioning this way. We are ready for a new economy like transition time banking, etc. But don't have much access to internet, she says. So we sit in restaurants to meet with you. My point is, the underemployed are ready.
For a change, yes. It's interesting that she doesn't have any benefits because she doesn't officially have a job. Yeah.
Yes, there's lots of interesting issues around that. One is that what she's describing, I suspect, is an unrecognized feature in. I don't know whether there's any indication of where she is, but there's certainly something that's been happening very visibly in the States, and I think I was sort of assuming America, and it's very, very visibly in the States and slightly less visibly in the UK, which is that there's been a kind of skewing of the statistics about employment. Lots of people who aren't registering as unemployed aren't claiming benefits because it's almost impossible to get them, or for whatever reason, and therefore they're not showing up on the statistics. And meantime, the governments are telling of interesting stories about how actually there's more employment, but when you look into the figures of what employment there is, there are people doing jobs which are less well paid and often with no guarantee of hours. And so they make it look as if we're improving the employment prospects in countries, when actually the reality is that I suspect there's a lot more people like Ruth Ann that are operating in different areas, and that if we were to have a different system, we would actually make it possible for people like her to function more effectively and with a more appropriate level of reward for what they put in.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm. The question is how we do that.
Yeah.
There is in this
Daniel
regard,
again.
Daniel.
Oh,
He says Slavoj Zizek wants that a society that pays everybody a base income would be a nightmare if it's run by a super rich elite that then creates a big brother kind of world. And he shares the caution with that guy. What is your idea about that?
Well, I guess there's lots of scenarios where control and big brother in our current world are risks that we should be aware of, because that's another side of the technology. Excuse me. And I don't know whether it's a bigger risk under a system where everybody is guaranteed a basic level of income than it is under our current system. I think the people in power, if they want to find ways of exercising that kind of control, probably would do so anyway. But yes, I wouldn't disagree that there are dangers.
mm-hmm.
Okay, there's Melanie asking if she can come in. You can come in, sure. The seat is open.
Yeah.
And I answered the question. It is answered. Okay, this is her question. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
How do I get that away? Let me see. I do that, and then we are learning new platforms. So
Yay.
here is
Yeah.
Melanie.
Here comes Melanie.
All right.
Oh,
Okay,
hello.
I haven't been on for a while, so I'm looking at this thing now. There we go. All right. Hey.
Hello.
Love me.
Well,
There you are.
I was, wait a second. I'm sorry. Oh my gosh. I'm really like more organized than this. I don't know. Just believe it. How are you guys?
Well, you look quite
Well,
organized.
I
We're doing
have
well.
makeup on. My hair's like super short because I said, give me the boy cut. I didn't mean little boy. I meant like teenage boy. But she took the razor. She took the razor to it and was like off. But hair grows back. So
Yeah. Nice to see you. You're looking well.
Melanie is a very old friend
I
of
kind
us.
of guessed from the nature of the conversation. So is there something that you wanted to
And
say on
she
this
is-
topic, Melanie, or are you just?
well, I know
hanging-
it's about world money economy kind of stuff, and I'm always interested in that because we're all interconnected, and things kind of ripple out from each other. So, what's it look like? What's our general forecast going to be in 2016, if you can predict?
Oh, I don't. That's an interesting question. It's not an area I generally go into, and I have to say, well, where I'm standing is that my perception of our whole world economy for several years has been that the crash which happened 5-6 years ago was it was an opportunity that would have taken the system down and reset it. But we didn't do that because we bailed people out and we brought in quantitative easing and all sorts of things. And so I see the system as a kind of a house of cards, with some of the cards not looking too straight anymore. And I've been in the belief system that it is really very vulnerable and unstable. And I'm now at the point where I've had so many expectations that it was going to collapse in a heap, and it hasn't happened. I'm very reluctant to make predictions anymore, but I still have that basic feeling that there's nothing really holding it together. And there are so many potential pressures that I see that could take it down, might take it down. I mean, at the moment, Germany is very fragile because of all sorts of things, including the impact of refugees. There's a war that's building up that is bigger than it was. And there are all sorts of things in the American economy which actually are fundamentally dodgy, in which people seem to be kind of going, no, not here. No, I can't see it. And sooner or later, because my perception of the system is it relies a great deal on belief, faith, trust, confidence, sooner or later that's going to bust.
I think we probably are going to end up with a lot of Americans watching this blab. And I'm wondering, what do you see as particularly dodgy in an American kind of way? Anything in particular?
Yes. Sorry, I have the tail end of a cold which won't quite go away. Oh dear. How many enemies? How many people can I offend in a very short space of time?
Five at a time.
Okay. I guess my perception of the history of America is that a huge amount of what has been successful in America has been related to oil, and not just in the sense of how important oil was as a commodity, and the availability of it to the American economy, but also for the fact that oil is priced in dollars. And so the preservation of the kind of petrodollar system has been as much about keeping the currency stable, even though the world economy was creating a lot of pressure against the dollar. And so sometimes, some of the things that look like wars about supply of oil are also wars about don't go trying to sell oil in any other country than in currency than dollars. And so one of the biggest vulnerabilities for America is potential that people will, the countries will take more of the oil trades outside of the dollar relationship, and that then all the vulnerabilities that the dollar has in other economic senses will become much more visible, and there'll be nothing to prop it up.
Wow. I didn't even think that was possible, that you would be able to change the value system of what backs an entire industry, like the dollar, and swap that out for a different type of, I don't want to say, well, it's currency, different type of currency. But
it's been tried before. In fact, I mean, some people say that this is part of what was the Iraq War was about, because there were attempts to start selling by, I think both Iran and Iraq, if I remember rightly, to sell oil priced in euros instead of dollars. And so weakening those countries and making sure that they couldn't go outside the system was part of making sure that the world had to keep funneling money into dollars in order that the reserves were there so that they could do oil-related transactions.
Mm-hmm. I didn't know that.
Wow. Yeah, oil rules the world. Like you said, there is a lot of back deals going, like who gets that pipeline? Where does it go? And it's just a matter of, from what I understand, I'm in the US and I read a lot of global stuff just because I can, because it's available. So why not read? And if Russia, these superpowers say, okay, here's our deal, and you're not allowed to buy this commodity or whatever that commodity is, you have to purchase it from here. You are setting, you become the master distributor, which that is very, very dangerous, because then there is no free market. As I understand free market as we have in America, it's very different in other places of the world. So it's hard for me to imagine the controlling mechanism that if someone told us that here, like, okay, you're not going to deal with that country anymore. You have to deal with this country because that's what we dealt. That's the deal we signed. I don't know. I think other countries experience that to a certain level, but I don't have any experience with that, and it's scary.
Yeah, I understand what you're saying, and it relates to some of the things that were being said on the call, that we did before this blab about the fact that actually nobody has experienced what it would mean to live in free market capitalist system, because we haven't ever had one, and. What you're describing is just another feature of the many ways in which capitalism has been kind of degraded and effectively destroyed, both by manipulation, government and power plays and so on, and also by the fact that we then, as I was describing, destroyed the whole basis of what money means by having banks issue loads and loads of debt, so that currencies didn't mean what they meant once before either. So the whole system of capitalism became a debtist system or a creditist system, where we do everything based on money that doesn't exist, and that it's like another of the things that I explain in the book is the way that the debt is it's not living on borrowed money, it's living on borrowed time. Because debt is something that somebody always, in theory, is supposed to pay back in the future, and whether that's we pay it back or we expect our children to pay it back or our grandchildren to pay it back, we've borrowed time, and of course the amounts of time we now borrow are colossal, because the ratio of global debt to the ratio to the amount that we actually produce. One way of looking at it is that if you had borrowed 40 times your annual income and didn't look like paying it back, somebody would say you're bankrupt. But the world can do that, and there's nobody to call in the debt, in a sense. There's nobody to say, well, we're living in a bankrupt system, but actually we are. And that's another of the reasons why sooner or later I can't see how it can do anything but collapse, because that money isn't going to be paid back. And unless we somehow have this kind of huge slide in the value of money so that people can pay it back like they could have done with a wheelbarrow in 1929, we're not going to be in a situation where our debts are repayable.
Well, aren't we kind of heading that way with the mentality of Bitcoin? It's this imaginary thing that people day to day, the value of that changes, and it's just like goes in this account and this account and this account, and it's like this. And I don't want to say secret, but it's this intangible thing. Like I can't reach in my pocket and give you some Bitcoin. It's not that kind of currency. So is that going to save us or be worse for us if Bitcoin, continues to be done?
Yeah, there's sort of two levels of an answer to that. I don't trust what's happened with Bitcoin any better than you do or what you're describing as such. So will Bitcoin be the answer? I'm very doubtful about that. Is it possible for these alternative virtual cryptocurrencies to be part of the solution? I think yes, hugely so. But they have to be set up outside. They have to be free from the kind of manipulation that I think has happened to Bitcoin, which is not so different in mentality to the kind of manipulation that happens around all other currencies. In theory, the virtual currencies, they could be a genuine way of having the laws of supply and demand work so that what people want, need and desire in relation to what is available to them would actually set the price level, and that would be transparent and open and available to everybody, and would be a fully kind of, these would become the people's currencies. That I think is potential, but they have to be set up in such a way that cannot be interfered with. And I haven't investigated Bitcoin in depth, but my gut feeling is that it's been grossly interfered with.
Yeah, I don't know. From what I gather, the connotation that people that even participate in Bitcoin, they're wagering on that, just in case that does become such a valuable way of our transactions in the future, that they're already there because they're the early adapters. So that's the only way I think that it's generating popularities, because of, a fear. Like, you got to have it.
It's a speculation.
Uh-huh.
It's a speculation is what you're describing. Just like people might still go out and buy some gold coins just in case everything collapses, because that would be one of the more likely things that the world would go back to if everything collapsed. And yes, it's speculation, or you might think of it as insurance. I wouldn't think of Bitcoin as an insurance, but I'm sure you're right that some people have done.
I think people not in my age bracket, way below my age bracket, that's just their, maybe because their minds are more open and, they're not as cynical through the years that we've become. But that's, I have, like, for instance, I have a nephew, and he's really into this Bitcoin, and he's invested in it. He does transactions with it, and he's not going to convince me yet, but people within his age bracket, this is what they're doing. And
I could be wrong.
There are more businesses that are saying, "Hey, we will trade in Bitcoin now." It's like, how does it's beyond me. Just because it's not based, it just changes value too often for me to have any confidence in it for myself. But I know there are younger people who are wagering on it.
Yeah, I guess we'll see.
Yeah.
Yeah. I have another question. There were experiments going on, I know, also in Austria, with local currencies. And that was the result, was that the region was blooming. It was, absolutely positive, and then the central governments forbid it.
This happened in. It's one of the stories that I tell in the book. I have it under the title "The Miracle of Virgil," which you Heidi will know is spelled WO_RGL.
Virgo. And this is where we pass by when we go to Germany.
And yes, that was a very interesting experiment, because basically the mayor started issuing a currency, and the thing about how the currency worked was that you couldn't hold on to it. If you held on to the currency, it effectively dropped in value. A little bit of its value would drop off at the end of the month. And so what that meant was that people who had that currency felt they had to spend it, and spend it quickly. And what that created was an internal dynamic economy that actually operated 14 times as fast as the rest of Austria, because they were simply flowing money around. See, one of the things that people don't think about with money is it isn't just amounts of money. If I have $10 and I spend it in 10 days' time, and the person who I spend it with spends it in 10 days' time, then 30 days of business is about $30 of movement. If I spend my $10 today and he spends that $10 tomorrow, and so on and so on, you have $300 of transactions in the month. So the amount of business in the economy is related to the speed and flow of the money, not just to how much there is.
Like a fresh vegetable, you're trying to consume it and hoping others consume it just as quickly before it rots.
Yes, exactly. So. And what it creates is a completely different kind of economic dynamic. There's a tiny hint of this, actually. Excuse me. Sorry about that. Even in what's happening in the European economy right now, because we've reached the point where the standard interest rate from the Central European Bank is now negative. So it actually, instead of the relationship we're used to is one where you borrow money and you have to pay back more. It's now one where you pay back less, and so therefore, if you've lent money, the value of that money is going to drop. So the incentive becomes.
Is this reality?
This is reality. Yes, I mean, in fact, it was happening. I think is it just yesterday or the day before that Mario Draghi was saying, "Oh yes, we're going to knock another 1/10 of a percentage point." So it will be 1/10 of a percentage point more negative than it was previously. And the hope was that was going to regenerate the European economy, and the immediate response was that the stock markets dropped, I think, by something like 3% in a day. So there's a little bit of confidence manipulation going on there. We're trying to make the economy move faster, and the world isn't responding, and that's possibly because the difference between Virgil and the central bank in Europe is that it's actually the people who have the money, and so they act. Whereas if you do it with banks, there's this kind of big inertia factor that you can give banks money, but that doesn't mean they lend it to anybody or that somebody actually does something productive in the economy. And so yes. That's an interesting little hint of the same experiment, but not working.
Yeah, and It was there, as it was in the region. People began to buy local things. They didn't go anymore to buy stuff which came from far away, but was produced in the zone. And so the whole production boomed. And, it was not that you bought stuff from Australia or from New Zealand, but you bought the local vegetables and food at the time when it was there, and imagine what can happen. I mean, you buy the bread again at the bakery of your place where they are doing it. I mean, in the area, it must not be right in the shop, yes, but in the area, instead of having it brought by airplane from somewhere. I mean, it's changing completely the whole thing. And I really was so disappointed that it was stopped. And it's not only that, there were other things which I found amazing. I think there's a German woman, probably you know her name, I have forgotten the name, who was studying this. She saw an experiment where students had a certain amount of papers, and they could exchange it for lessons from higher students of a higher grade, and they could exchange it from a higher grade and from a higher grade, but they had to be also there was a limit of time where they had to be exchanged. So you were really encouraged to not only spend the money, but also do relationships between, and get help from more experienced people. So the whole chain of experience of people, you could, without paying anything in this sense, but you could have extra lessons when I'm a 5th grade from an 8th grade person, and that from a first year of a university, and that one from a 5th year, or whoever, And it seemed to me such a perfect idea. Without any money, only the last one, they could then change it in real money. When they are at a certain level. I don't know if I report that right. It is some years ago that I read this article, but I found it so amazing, the idea to enhance the social interaction by that.
But yes, to me, that leads it to if you put more confidence into relationship building, then you begin to favor more individuals than others, and then that's how you can get into corruption. Am I too cynical? I think I am. Really, I think I am.
I don't know about cynical, but I'm not quite getting how the mechanics of that. It works as an experiment in terms of producing social relationships, but as an economic thing, somebody has to be feeding the money in at the bottom, and if that's only coming out at the top in favor of the people who are already at the top, unless they're the ones who are feeding the money in at the bottom, the circle doesn't kind of quite work. But
But it's not really the top. There were some situations, I think the last students in the last year, when they begin to create their profession, then they get the real money out or something like that. I've forgotten how it was. It is not that, it was not a power structure. Not everybody could get it. Okay. No.
That's probably what I was thinking of. I was probably thinking of that traditional pyramid thing where, the bottom feeders.
Yeah.
No, it didn't seem to me. It didn't seem to me that it was like this. But
I was thinking the professor at the top.
I think what it shows is that actually these systems are much more flexible than we tend to think of them about, and you can use the currency in all sorts of different ways to achieve different effects. And this is another of the aspects of kind of that we only have one kind of money, when what we really want is lots of alternative possibilities to do different things with different monies, and for people to have much more flexibility, possibility, choice in how we run affairs.
Yeah, it is a little bit what we said before with Roseanne, no? I know also here in Italy there was a woman who took care all the time for her mother until the mother died, and she was 52 then, and not the mother, the daughter, and she hadn't anything. She didn't get the pension of her mother. She didn't get anything, and she has never paid into the because she never got money. So she was on the mercy of her brother. Her brother gave her money to live, and she managed to die she was then overrun by a motorcycle, and she died short after I got to know her.
It shows that how systems can become extremely inflexible and unresponsive and kind of built around rules and tick boxes, when actually we need to have ways that we operate systems that are genuinely sensitive to human decisions and choices and the kind of the unusual exceptions. It can all be done. I mean,
how would you see that it can happen?
Yeah, it's all doable.
How can
we just had old ways of thinking. We had old mentalities. I mean, again, using integral language, it's kind of old-fashioned, clumsy blue. When we have the potential to rethink what processes and systems look like, and to set them up in new, more flexible ways which have more possibility for people to make decisions based on knowledge rather than what boxes have been ticked, so that they can actually respond to the genuine situation. I mean, this isn't just true in social care. It's like it's the difference that you see between a company which might have chosen to operate its customer services in a way which gives real discretion to the customer services operative, that they respond to the customer as a human being rather than responding based on, well, these are the rules we have set up, this is when we will refund money, this is not. And you can set up companies in such a way that you give discretion to the customer service agent. And what's the result of that? Well, you create greater customer satisfaction, and you have companies which are more loved and appreciated, and they grow and they function better than the ones which are working entirely inside the rigid boxes. That's both a choice of attitude and values system, and it's something which is also made probably easier than it ever has been before by the good sides of what computers can do, because if you set computers up so that they allow that discretion rather than that the computers make the decision. We have a comedian in this country who had a whole set of kind of circumstances that they set up, and you saw this agent, and the punchline of this was, computer says no. and we've lived that world. It's funny because we actually know, but and underneath it's not so funny, is it? I mean, but we know it. We laugh at it because we've lived that, but we don't have to live that reality. We have a choice.
Mm-hmm. So you definitely were hinting towards what, for instance, Frederic Laloux wrote in the book Reinventing Organizations. And what I would ask you, do you think to make that happen, we need a second-tier, integral, whatever leadership?
If you don't have a second-tier leadership, I mean, Frederic says this in his book, then basically the system isn't given permission to change. So, and it probably takes a second-tier leadership to do that, or if not, it takes a leadership which is kind of willing to surrender and say, okay, I don't have to be in control here. I'm willing to allow this to be tried and tested. I don't think there are many individuals who work like that. And of course, the problem is that CEOs and so on, they typically work inside structures which have boards which will fire them the minute they do that, because they're looking at the short term. So, and this is why I'm very strongly engaged in this country with conscious capitalism, and Laloux's work and conscious capitalism live in the same territory, that they're about how we change business. and I'm all in favor of changing business. But one of the reasons I wanted to write Reinventing Capitalism is that if we don't change the surrounding structures so that we create more flexibility and enabling and support that will affect how businesses can change, then that's less likely to happen than we want it to be. So we have to reinvent capitalism as well as reinvent organizations.
Don't we have to wait till everybody comes on board, like a certain percentage of the whole pie, to do that? Because if you didn't have everybody backing that idea, it really wouldn't get off the ground. I mean,
we have to have a plan. I think we have to have a way that we work towards it, so that even those who aren't ready to change are willing to give permission for others to do the experiment and to work towards it. Because this isn't something that's going to happen. It's like, it's about as likely as Britain deciding that tomorrow all the cars should drive on the right when we've been driving on the left. It doesn't really bear thinking about. That we will actually have to find out how we work our way through that transition process from the old economy, the old capitalism, into something which is new and radically different.
I wonder if we won't advance to that point until until it's absolutely necessary, because there's nothing left to do.
There is a big risk of that, and of course the things I said earlier about the potential that we will have a large-scale collapse may well be a part of that scenario. I think my perspective on it is whether that's right or not, the answer is still the same, which is that we need to be building it now, so that we have as much of it as possible ready in order to cope with whatever happens next.
So what do you think we should do? At least, shall we grow up into integral?
Yeah, why don't we do that? Okay.
But how can we inspire other people to do that? And for me, for instance, all this economic thing, it's for me, should I learn something? What can I do, even if it's not my how do you say, my area? What can we do to make that happen? I speak a little bit like the voice of the.
Well, it's a fair question. It is one that deserves an answer, and I think there's a couple of answers. The first is that everybody should do what it is in their in their remit and their capability to do, and that may be. That as an individual you don't need to know about economics, but that you do things that you're probably already doing, which is you choose differently for different reasons, because you can see that is what's going to be of benefit. And then there are people, if anybody goes on to the reinventingcapitalism.org website, one of the things that I have there is a proposal which it kind of popped into my head at the end of October. I don't know quite where it's going to lead, but I call it collaboration for change, because part of what I see is that there are thousands of people and hundreds of organizations, all of which have one piece of the puzzle of what's this new future going to look like, and often are out there kind of campaigning vigorously or trying to fundraise or whatever for their piece of the puzzle. And a couple of things happen. One is that all our voices, even though we sort of overall, we have the same sense of this is where we want to aim and this is the kind of world we want to create. Our voices are diluted and we're just ignored or picked off by the media because they say, well, yes, you're talking about this, but what about this? And because we don't have a collective picture to present, we're not equipped to answer that question. And so it looks like there's nothing that's possible and nothing that's coherent, and everybody gets disillusioned about a possibility of change. So part of my perception is that those who can, and those who have those pieces of the puzzle, that we really need a collaboration which comes together possibly around the 36 proposals, or at least as a starting point around the 36 proposals that are in the book, and says, okay, how do we actually assemble this? How do we put this together and turn it into something that people can see, oh, yes, this is a system that can work, and these are changes that we could be making now that will take us in that direction. And we can start to build the new story of what the future can look like for us all to have faith in, and for people to engage in wherever they are, from wherever they are, in whatever way is appropriate to them. I mean, it doesn't mean that it certainly, I don't believe in a world, and I've said this around reinventing organizations as well, that there is a kind of mythology that develops that if you build a teal organization, everybody in the organization becomes teal, and it's not how it needs to work. It's not how it can work, and it's basically it is a mythology. But what we need to build is systems which enable people to be who they are, where they are, functioning healthily, and that all of that healthy articulation from all of the levels and different facets of systems and different occupations and all of that all of those are in a position to contribute from where they are, and they're valued for what they are, and we articulate that to work together into a whole, and that the whole is integral.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, we come there to what we said before, that everybody should have the opportunity to do the things they like to do and they are good in, and find the place where they can do it to contribute to the bigger whole and get paid for it. Not only because I like singing, I won't get paid for it, or because I like, I don't know what, painting, I don't get paid for it, but find a place where it is needed and what it can help for something, and then you get also paid for it. So we have to change the idea of work, no? What work is and what. And you know what you said before, Jon, I find it so it came to my mind lately. We are all trying to do something. You are writing your book. We are doing these shows. You are doing your stuff. Everybody does something. What is missing is getting out of the competition mode, which is still there often, and do things together in some way. Share each other's stuff or collaborate. Maybe we don't need to have 10,000 shows, but for instance,
or 10,000 books,
or
10,000 books. But
and this is one of the big challenges of the transition, even for those of us who are well motivated and who are in it, but who perhaps you were looking earlier on for how you crowdfund the show, because in order. Yeah, exactly. And in order that these enterprises continue, they need to be supported. And so because the flip side of all those kind of people with the one piece of the puzzle who are shouting and trying to make their one piece of the puzzle work, is it creates the illusion that we're all in competition with each other. And actually one of the things that I've described in the few pages of the Collaboration for Change proposal is, well, that wouldn't be the case if at the moment we're all it feels like we're all fighting for a slice of a small cake. But the bigger voice, and the bigger campaign and the bigger creation of the amount of work that could actually be physically engaged with and started now would mean that there is much more there to be done. There's a much bigger cake for us to have our slices of, that we benefit from the collaboration rather than feeling like it's a competition. But these are all histories. These are all part of the fears that we've grown up with and live with almost as habits that we don't think about.
Yeah, and I was especially disillusioned by the integral community that I thought when you are inside of an integral consciousness that you might have changed that a little bit, but it doesn't seem to be.
Well, it's tough because there's a long history of our kind of unconscious ways of being, and what our parents brought up us up to be, and what society has trained us to be, and what we actually think is the nature of financial reality that keep us in that place. And so that's one of the things that I, when I talked earlier about having started the book from the point of view of what is it that's going on inside, what is it that causes us to work, from fear and greed and desire for power and desire for control and all of that. It's getting into that space where we start asking ourselves the question about, is the reality that I've been living in actually, does it have a reality? And if not, how about I could choose a different one?
Maybe we learn these things too late. Yeah. When you think about how we spend our first 18 or 20 years, and then what we do within that next decade from 20 to 30, and then the 30 to 40, and the 40 to 50, and so on and so forth. By the time we've got it figured out, it's way too late to benefit from all of the things we were supposed to be doing in the first place. So
I think it can look like that to people like us because we're the ages we are.
Yeah.
Because I don't mean that. Because we've lived through a world where for the first half of our life it actually looked like that might have been fairly functional, and it's because the conditions are changing. This is a standard spiral dynamics, Colin, that life conditions are changing, and therefore the values have to change in order to respond that we can thrive in them. And so we're now experiencing the pressure that calls for us to recognize what we're describing and what you've just said, Melanie. But it's not because of our age, it's just because of where we are in the historical timeline.
Well, how do we get people in their 20s to, it's really hard for that generation to look just a decade ahead or 2 decades ahead when they're busy with still growing up. Or raising kids that are trying to grow up.
Well, yes, but I mean, I encounter quite a number of the sort of the millennial generation who are already well engaged with this because they've just seen it. Even the sense that it is reported in the statistics that companies are trying to recruit the able millennials, and they don't want to work under the conditions that the companies used to offer them, and in the ways that used to be offered to them, because they know that's not what life needs to be. So I think they're already answering the questions, and asking the questions and coming up with a lot of the answers. I suspect that if we were to engage with the collaboration for change, we would find that a lot of the best answers would be emerging from the millennial generation and not from these old wise grey heads that.
Which pisses me off.
Oh, yes, but isn't it also a relief?
You have the solution.
Isn't it a relief too? It's like, we don't have to. There are actually other people who can, and maybe. We can support that.
What I think is our generation has prepared that the next generation can be much quicker and can enter into these sorts of thinking much before we figured it out. We figured it out late, because it took all the time. But as you said, it was the time. It's not because we are stupid or something, but it was just not yet around
to discuss these things. Right now. We can discuss this, and we're in different countries, in different time zones right now. And when has that been available before? So maybe we...
Well, you talked on the beer table, you talked with your buddies around.
You used to be a little community, as round as that table was.
All of that is true, and it's also when you talk about aspects which are in the arena of kind of consciousness raising, that actually people like us, I don't know exactly what you've done, Melanie, but people like us probably have been spending 10, 20, 30 or more years doing the groundwork in changing ourselves, in learning what that means and what the new possibilities might be that come out of that.
Yeah.
And so, yes, we've both created the field in which this becomes possible. And yes, in many cases, we might have endeavored to raise our children to see those new perspectives in the world and not to start from where we started from.
Yeah, actually, it is not possible that they start there where we start.
You just have to learn it a lot faster.
But they do. But think how their brains are being trained. I mean, there's a lot of criticisms made about children spending all their time playing on little boxes that do virtual reality. But the processing speed that's involved in that, the number of multiple variables that they have to consider that they're learning to engage with at 5, 6, 7, and 8, they're being trained in complexity thinking in a way that we never were. And it's visceral, and I think it's a completely different world. Yeah,
and it's a safe place to create. And like Minecraft. I don't play Minecraft, but the premise of Minecraft is you're building everything from raw materials. So like if you want an axe, you have to go mine the iron to make your blade and go get a tree. I mean, you have to build all these things. You're mining. That's why it's called Minecraft. So these very young children who participate in those building skills, they're learning the new concept that they just can't go in their convenience store and buy it off the shelf. In this particular game, it may take them weeks and weeks and weeks to build what they want their little world to be from the raw materials. And I think it's a really, really good game for a process for that reason.
Yeah,
or we didn't have that.
They start to learn a kind of systemic thinking that the world has been lacking because it's spent the last 100, 200 years taking things to bits and seeing them only in portions that don't work out, don't operate in a living cycle. They're not alive and connected, and they're having to kind of engage with wholes in ways that they're what's going to be necessary if we're going to engage with ways of life and economy which incorporate organic and biomimicry and all those good concepts. So I think it's at least some of them may be getting that awareness and training. It doesn't have to be all of them. It just needs enough.
Yeah, something to invigorate the brain to think differently instead of so instantaneously and being gratified right now.
And I think we old ones, we need also invigorate our brains. But I want to come to something else. We have a good conversation here in the chat, and I want to invite you if you want to come in and talk with us. And if you want to have a question, which we can also bring up when we have only 3 seats occupied, you have to type in Q and slash and then behind your question.
It's
and then
slash, we can see then Q, space. Yes.
Slash. Thank you. Okay.
I probably don't have a great deal more time on this, as much as I'm enjoying it.
Okay.
And it's stimulating, but
it is wonderful. And Jon, if you would like to, we can do these things sort of regularly, because you see it's 33 people were attracted to the topic, and quite a few stayed here, maybe not all the time, but some are staying all the time. And you see there is an interest, and you might reach more people directly and get them interested in buying your book and reading your book and all your ideas. I think we have these wonderful platforms gratis for some months now, and it's really worthwhile to
if there's an appetite for the conversation, I'm obviously delighted to continue it.
Sometimes you don't wait for them to have an appetite. Wonderful. You just set the table and have them develop the saliva, what's the word? The drool, the drool.
Salivate.
Salivation. So have the buffet table out all the time so they can like sniff it and begin to salivate.
Okay.
Yeah. And you people in the audience, circle us. It's not circle here on this platform. It is follow us. And you can do that. You know, you click on our names and then they ask you to follow. And I have followed more or less everybody here, I think. Yeah. And then you find us also in the profile and you can follow us. And then you get the invitation when we set up a new blab, we send it out and then pops up XYZ is on blab. That might be at the end a little bit disturbing, but I find it interesting because I see if somebody is there and I have time and then I go in, as probably you did.
That's what I did. I saw your scheduled blab and I said, okay, I know what time that is in my time zone, so I'm going to like be available, but I was late because I was somewhere else, but I'm here and you will start carrying on the conversation, so that was good.
Yes. But I'm missing Hobart.
He's still so camera shy. He really is. I don't know what it is, but he is going to do a podcast with me. So that is like on a microphone with no camera. So he said yes to that. But he will not, I don't know what it is. I told him he can wear a hat. He can wear a hat.
Well, sure.
Or a mask, like in Venice Carnival.
Yeah, I think maybe because, he was in, he's a retired post office person. And in front of I've seen many, many faces and many people have seen my face. And I don't know, I had to tell him this, they're not going to like complain back like they do the post office.
Okay.
It's always funny that the stamp will go up like 3 cents, but it'll take like 7 years for Congress to pass that law to have it go up 3 cents, and boy do they complain, and they take it out on the guys at the post office when it's Congress that does it, not the guys behind the counter.
Yeah. That's
well, in any event, say hello to him.
I will.
Yeah.
Hello.
Okay. And thank you so much, everybody who has watched us and is still watching and will watch again, hopefully. And to you, Jon, it was really delightful, and we will follow up. Okay.
Yeah, we will have to.
And Melanie,
I've enjoyed it.
This time we won't do. Last time we did a show on the 31st of December, and there was Melanie with Hubbard, and he was in the front of the camera.
Oh yeah, he was.
And we hoped he would take on.
but he's asked several times if you're going to do that again this year.
Okay, we can do something alike.
Because that was such a thrill to meet everybody from the different places like that, and saying, "Are they going to do that again?" I'm like, "I think so."
Okay, we might think about that. Okay. Let us connect, and we gather people from all over the world and have 31st midnight all over the world.
All again and again. Every hour we'll do it.
We will be drunk.
With a new bottle of champagne for each hour. Okay, y'all.
Okay, thank you.
So much.
Thanks, everybody. Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Thanks, Melanie, for asking so many questions.
Yeah.
I'm really good that way. Okay, Hope, they were asking about you. Oh, I think I'm still on. Oh, let's